Okay, good morning. It's 10 a.m. on February 16th, 2012, and it's time for Open Hours. And today we're going to be talking about Yeti. And Yeti's the automated test launcher thing that I really should have much better words to describe, but generally it's really awesome, and we'll get Reid to go over some of the new awesomeness in there. A couple of opening notes before we get into the content. Right now the gallery build system, or the gallery pushes are broken. It's a long story and we're working on it, but hopefully those will be up very soon. As you can imagine, Dave is not very happy about that. And when Dave is not happy, that's a sign of a bad thing. So, let's see. Otherwise, new and notable stuff going on since last week. Eric, anything interesting to note from last week? News, updates, schedule with YUI releases, or progress in the PR?
Yeah, let's see. We have so last week I was involved in a lot of button discussions, which we seem to have gotten hammered out.
Oh yeah.
And so we have some good stuff going there, which should be pushed into master probably the end of this week. But yeah, I think everyone's just kind of been heads down plugging away. There's been a lot of commits this week on the GitHub, so.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought up the button thing, because there were questions about that a couple of weeks ago, and especially about the API the button was going to have, and then some awkwardness over subscribing to events and things like that. So we've got resolution in place for that, and so event subscription will be off of the instance as well. There's going to be a factory method that what it'll do is it'll decorate a node with special getters and setters that for attributes and things like that. But then there's also going to be a separate Y.button class, and that Y.button class will be a widget-based thing. So for more complex buttons that have more state, more UI associated with them, are more widget-like because they're managing multiple objects, then that's more appropriate to have as a widget. But for just the simple button case where you really want to just treat it like a node, it actually will be a node now. And so we're exploring some of the little itty-bitty details in the implementation side of things, but at least for 3.5, it seems pretty solid at this point, and the API is going to be intuitive, how you would expect it to be when you actually are working with node instances. There we go. So, with that, Reid, why don't you get us up to speed on what's going on with Yeti? For those of the people that might be watching the recording that aren't familiar with what Yeti is, you want to give a quick overview of what it is too?
Sure. Yeah, Yeti is a project that's been around for over a year. It came out meaning to actually help with YUI developers, our own teams, developers trying to being able to run tests really quickly. Just that's all it was trying to do. It's basically when YUI, all of YUI's tests are HTML files, and so whenever engineers would update things, they would have to either before they check things in, they would have to run these on different browsers themselves. And so the scope was very limited. All I wanted to do was make that faster, and it did that pretty well. And people are generally happy with it. So Yeti it stands for YUI Easy Testing Interface, because that's what it was doing, is taking YUI test and making it really easy to run really quickly, really fast. So after that was successful, I saw that it would be more useful for just our team, so that it became an open source project, and a lot of people have liked it. I've given talks on it and whatnot. So it's been good. However, with the reason why you're looking at this Yeti Next bit and why we're wanting to improve on it is because, it started out as being very simple. It's just something that you run on your computer. It was just all it was doing, and the only thing that Yeti has done so far has been to just make something just a little bit faster. It wasn't doing much more than that. But I saw, like, as people tried to use it, they saw I got similar questions over and over again, or similar kind of feature requests and things that actually, when I was using Yeti, I wanted too. One big no-brainer thing to me has been, well, when you're using Yeti, you typically have one person who has a whole bunch of, typically not everyone has like the machines they want to test on, right? So one reason why Yeti works so well, or worked so well, is that typically you'd have to, before you check something in, you have to test it on, say, a dozen browsers, right? The problem with Yeti, though, as it currently is that you have to actually connect all those browsers to your computer. And that's kind of a problem, because what if you have 4 or 5 people who are sharing, maybe you only have one Windows machine to go around for everyone. So in that case, it's a little bit more difficult, because you have to go over and then point the browsers all back to your computer, and you have to do this by hand, and it's kind of tedious. So this idea that you can actually test, you set up one Yeti server, if you will, and then have other things connect to it and be able to submit tests and work through that server people have always asked for this. I mean, in particular, we could use it on our team just because we have Dave Glass, who has a very nice testing setup at his house, and sometimes that could be really useful if instead of if at the very least, like, as a fallback for things that we have available elsewhere, or developers' own VMs. So that would be really cool, like the idea to just submit things to it. So that was there. The other problem that I was kind of annoyed about is how Yeti just ran tests inside of an iframe. So you would go to you would visit Yeti by going somewhere, and then the problem with this is that iframes are pretty poor for use in a lot of our tests, and that can range. They're just inconsistent. We'll find that sometimes.
Meaning that we get a lot of false positives and things about
exactly.
false negatives, I guess, and test failures that aren't really failures when they're not used in that particular iframe environment.
Yeah, so it's not helpful really when that kind of thing happens, because people are then finding out, is this a problem with the test framework, or is this and that's not what Yeti was supposed to do. It was just supposed to get out of the way of that, right? In fact, that's a big thing with Yeti, is that how a lot of other test automation frameworks don't take that kind of care that I feel is necessary when doing this kind of thing, right? Like they'll pollute your page unnecessarily, and so I just didn't think it was done very well. And I think Yeti could have done better in that regard, but it required a lot of work to get it to do that, because that means that instead of just giving a page, its controller page, a list of tests to run, which is really easy to do. Instead, the server has to maintain all that state, and also be able to recover from errors and whatnot if you get rid of an iframe. So that's the two big things that I wanted to fix, and that required a lot of rewriting of what Yeti used to do, and a lot of rethinking about like how this kind of thing will work. Especially the other things that aren't listed on this blog post here that kind of went into this are use inside of CI. So when I gave a talk about this 2 YUI-Cons ago, actually, when I gave a talk about this, I explained that Yeti was really focused on before you commit something, and it still is. Like that's still what it's really good at. But with these changes that make it more robust, it's actually going to be useful. People will be able to use this to build kind of like ad hoc kind of CI systems, or use it as a part of a larger, more robust CI system that might have you might just be able to address, like maybe you have a Selenium grid or something, right? That's outside the scope of Yeti. But the idea is that you can use some other external thing to tell all these this grid of systems under your control to like go and point to Yeti and use Yeti for the actual testing. So that's really cool. So that's another thing. I want it to be able to be embedded into another testing tool, and so that's what's being worked on now. But the thing I'm going to show you today is the advances made in how we've gotten rid of an iframe, which is great also for performance on mobile, and because iframes kind of suck on mobile devices, and they still kind of do, and their tests run slower and whatnot. So we got rid of it. Yep.
Real quick before we continue, for those of you, or for those folks that aren't familiar with the acronym, CI stands for?
Continuous integration.
Yes.
So yes. So that's having when you have a team of developers, when you check something in, the idea is that tests run automatically for that. So if someone checks in something bad, then it'll if you're running testing all the time on every time someone commits, you can know right away that something broke and it's this guy's fault.
Right. So the distinction that the Yeti is making is that if you have a group of developers that are making changes locally, then relying on a CI system to report that something is broken is too late. Right. You've already pushed a change into the master repo that is breaking something, and so you get notification that you did something wrong instead of getting forewarning that you're about to do something that's wrong, which is where Yeti really shines, is that you test your stuff locally before you push it into master. So there's you greatly decrease the chance that there will be some integration test that fails as a result of a change that you made. But because it's such a burden to test all of these browsers and all of these OSs, where you just might not even have that set up for all the browsers that your CI system would be testing against, then it becomes difficult or even impossible to do pre-commit testing. So the previous iterations of Yeti made it more convenient to launch the tests locally before committing. But the changes that we're going to be talking about are helping it go to the next level of having access to other environments that you don't have locally before you push to master.
So yeah, I'll just kind of dive right in and show you kind of how Yeti Next works. So I'm not going to go, and for time, I'm not going to show how the old Yeti works, but it's very, very similar. And I'll show those similarities where they exist. But so I'll just kind of dive in, and there's and explain things on the way. So, by the way, I want to mention this really quick before I get started. So, all this stuff is available here for now. It's on. I have a fork of YUI's Yeti, and so if you're interested in this is exactly the code that I'm running. It's going to be. I don't recommend that you use it yet. If you're interested in what this kind of thing does, you can do a lot of the stuff I'm going to show you today with Yeti as it's with Yeti that you can install off npm that's already published. So this is not something I'd recommend you guys use, but I'll show you what we're doing and what will be available to you really soon, or at least as soon as I can wrap this stuff up, right? But it's all available. This is exactly the revision that I'm going to be showing you. But clone the URL queue, yay. So yeah, this is where to find it. It's /read/Yeti, and then the next branch of that branch.
Cool. Zoom in. Make sure that if you're showing stuff on the screen to zoom in for us, okay?
Oh yeah, sure. Like, let me try that out. I don't think I can do it on this screen for some reason, but I'll zoom in the text. So is that better? Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. So, so typically what you would do with Yeti is you would have to start a server first. So if I was, the idea is that you'd run a command like this. You would do something like this first, and then you would open up a new terminal, if you will, and then you could run Yeti tests. Like if I had a test.html file, I'd run it here. But this is kind of cumbersome. Like if you try to do this Yeti test.html first, it would just give you an error message. And actually, when I first wrote Yeti, you didn't start up a server. You would just do Yeti test.html, and then it would like open a browser for you and do all that. So I missed that. I actually, that's something, it kind of went away because it never really worked well. And I think that really I don't see why people need to do, it should just work, right? You should just be able to give it any kind of test that you want to run, and it should just be able to do the best that it can with it. So that's what it'll do. So I'm going to run this command, which is just the Yeti executable. It's just local. So imagine when I'm typing node CLI that it's just Yeti, because that's what it is. So instead of having to start a server, I can just give it a test. So I have YUI3 sim linked in here, so I can give it, say, widget test HTML. So when I do this, something different happens. Instead of giving me an error or starting up a server, it does it itself. So it creates a server, and it actually doesn't talk to it right away. It's just waiting on me. So it's telling me I have to go here, so I'll do that. Open up a browser and going to localhost 9000. So when I go back to the terminal, it shows me that a browser connected, and it's waiting for me to press enter. So what I can do here is that right away, so I'll go and open this test first. So there we go.
So Reid, before we get, can you explain what's going on with the node CLI thing a little bit more?
Yeah.
Or do we want to just continue on and then explain that a little later?
Yeah. What that is? So when I type node.CLI, that's just typing that's just typing Yeti. Basically the idea is that you'd run, instead of this, you would just type Yeti and then like a test file, right? And instead I'm typing just node-CLI because it just isn't installed. Like I'm just running it locally. That's all it is. So you can just imagine I'm typing Yeti. And in fact,
okay, so for the final product that actually goes out, the interface will be at the prompt. You'll be typing in Yeti and done.
Yeah. I mean, so I can do this for now. So the idea is you'd just be typing that. So, but I'll do this to make it look a little bit more personal. So the idea though is, this would be installed somewhere. Something I'm actually wanting to do, and this is something I did for the first version of Yeti, was provide an installer and all that fun stuff. So it's really easy. Like you won't have to manage node.js or something else. So because Yeti is itself written in Node and in JavaScript, it's a Node.js application. So anyway, so this is what I'm getting at here. So here's my test suite that I wanted to run. So Yeti. So when I do this, it creates. It tells me to go to this page. I'll go to the page. There it shows up. And when I hit enter, it starts testing it, and then it shows me the results on the command line. So this is exactly what Yeti does today. The only difference is that I didn't have to start a server at all. And so what happened is over here, which the server's actually it shut down. So because it's only available for that one test run. So I come back here and it shows all set. I'll try to actually get out of full screen here to show off this works. Whoa. I'll show what it's doing here. But so that this is connected. I'm gonna get out of full screen here. Move this over. So I'm going to hit enter. You see that the test runs and then it goes back to the main page when it's done. And right now, what I'm actually hoping to do is, even though the server shut down, what I'm hoping to do is actually make use of this page and show the summary and whatnot. But it doesn't do that for now. But that's the idea. It's really simple. I can give it more than just one of these, and this is where Yetis can be really powerful. Is say I can give it the autocomplete test. So let's see, functional. So now go back here. Now I'm ready to go. I start the test. It runs the widget test and immediately advances to the autocomplete test. Runs the autocomplete test, then shows me everything. So So that's pretty simple. So this is exactly what Yeti does today, but it's just a little bit nicer about how it does it. Something that's new that I want to show you guys is you notice that all these tests were running without an iframe. So every time I ran this command, normally Yeti would actually have its own page where after the welcome to Yeti bit, and it would actually have its own iframe that would show up, and it would run all the tests there. But as you just saw, what's actually happening is it's running the tests directly. It's actually there's no iframe at all, and all I'm doing is actually I'm injecting this that you see an error that happened here. There's actually it's just exactly how the old Yeti worked. It would inject a little tiny bit of JavaScript into the HTML until the test file that it served, and then it would do some cross-frame communication to tell the parent page to go submit the results to the server. So that's the idea of the injected script is the same, but it's also a little bit different too. Like with the old Yeti, this is mostly useful information for people who've used the old Yeti. But with the old Yeti, when the script would be injected, it got injected just really dumb at the end of the page, like it was just appended to the end of the HTML document. And that doesn't work so well because it can't catch errors or other things that happen because it's not the first thing that runs on the page. You didn't really need that because you had a parent page that can see well, the iframe isn't responding, I guess I'll advance. But that's really, really important when you don't have that iframe safety net, when you don't have some other parent controller page moving things around. As you saw, if a timeout occurs, if it couldn't find YUI Test in time, and right now it's probably due to my bad network connection. But if an error occurs, it has to be able to advance to the next test. So that changed a lot, and it's working fairly well. It's still, of course, under development, but that's the idea, is that this injection is a little bit smarter than it used to be, and you can find all that code inside of Yeti. But yeah, it also doesn't draw a lot of things on the page at all. It doesn't draw anything on the page. My hope, though, is that if something happens, say if I kill the server while this is running, when you're looking at the test pages, it'll actually show diagnostic information, hey, I'm trying to reconnect to the test or to the hub. The hub went away, so I'm looking for it, and because that's another pain point too that I'm hoping to fix with Yeti next. Is if your Yeti server died for any reason, you have to go and reconnect all of your browsers again, which is kind of a pain. And you don't necessarily have to do that. You could just wait for a while, and maybe if you wait 20 seconds, all of your browsers would reconnect, and that's what I want to fix too. So message in the chat about html5test.com, which I've never heard of before. So that's really interesting. So taking a look at that, though. Oh, cool. Yeah, that's really cool. So if people look at that HTML5 test page, it shows this kind of fancy output, and that's kind of what I'm wanting to do, right, with the final page. Instead of showing this can't connect to server page, that's the kind of thing I'm looking at, actually, is showing some statistics and whatnot. But that's not my most important thing right now. So that'll happen in time. There's a lot of cool things you can do with this. So the next thing that's on the Open Hours page was the ability for you to share this with others. And how would you do that? Well, I'm going to, when you run Yeti, so I have to pass it an option, so I'll say server. So now I can go to this localhost 9000, and it's now a hub. So what this means is that if I give other people this address, to my computer, right, of course, or create a local tunnel or something and give people that local tunnel address, people can other browsers can connect on different computers and stuff, can connect to this thing. So this Yeti server could be on, say, yeti.yuilibrary.com or something, right? And then I can have lots of other people connect to it, and it would just sit there waiting like this. This page right now is just waiting for connections to, or waiting for tests to come in. It's listening to the hub for tests to come in. So what I can do here is when I run this now, instead of saying it created a hub, it says connected to localhost 9000. And so it just basically found that it's running on the same computer, so I'm connected to it. And so the same kind of thing applies. When I hit enter, the test starts. But what's really powerful about this, though, is how other people on different computers can do this. So like this can be on this Yeti server can actually run on a completely separate computer. And when I run this Yeti command up here, this Yeti with widget and autocomplete tests, it's actually transferring those tests from my computer to yeti.yuilibrary.com and then serving it through the yeti.yuilibrary.com thing, right? So that's like completely new, and I think it's going to be very, very useful, right? Because we can have, like, say for example, you can set up if your company can set up a Yeti server, you can have, like, say your Yeti on your intranet, and then have all of your browse. You can just have, like, say all the way up to the receptionist desk, like have their old IE6 connect to the Yeti, your intranet Yeti hub, and then your developers can make use of all those browsers, which is really, really neat. So that's brand new, and you can check out more about that in the Yeti repository too, about how exactly that happens.
So would it be possible that we could actually test that out right now? Could you create a local tunnel for your local 9000 and
yeah
get a couple different browsers in there?
Yeah, so let's do that.
Yeah. So Reid, is that pretty similar to Test Swarm? That idea to have people remotely connect up.
Yeah, like Test Swarm is also kind of a CI tool, right? Too. So what I mean by that is, let me set up this local tunnel real quick. So 3pmp.localtunnel.com.
I see it. I was able to connect.
Cool. So hopefully that works.
So you got
starting up, so instead of all set, but
3pmp. Okay.
Looks. That's strange. It just says starting up instead of all set, but I don't think it will work. Yeah, I don't know why that's not working, folks. I'm sorry. Because it's not starting up correctly on local tunnel.
Oh, bummer. Okay, well, so maybe it's just something to do with a local tunnel connection, but the plan is to have...
Local tunnel doesn't support WebSockets, so that might be the problem, right?
Oh, local tunnel doesn't support WebSockets. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's kind of necessary. That's a bummer.
Oh well.
But yeah. So let's see. Yeah.
But the plan is to, instead of have this hosted through local tunnel, which obviously doesn't work now, to have that host exist at a domain that's accessible to other systems in that network.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So that's so right, like, and so what it's actually doing, let's see here. So I do this again, connect. So I'll start up some other browsers too. I can show that off. So Chrome, connect here. Move this down a little. Now when I do this with both, browsers are already connected, so when I hit enter, it runs on both of these. So this can get really nice really quickly. See if I can do this again. So there we go. This gets really nice really quickly because you can have a lot of browsers connected, and have them all kind of do this, which is really, really neat. Yeah, I'm getting the could not find YUI Test stuff errors a lot, and that's just a bug that I need to fix. So sorry about that, folks. But this concept, I'm really happy that at least the what I'm working on right now, this works well. Like the concept works really well. That like it is possible to make this thing that it's kind of magical, right? That it's taking all of your tests and shuttling that over to your Yeti hub, right? So one thing, I guess, to kind of drive this home, how this would work, because right now I didn't pass any configuration at all. So, oops, here. I didn't pass any configuration, but I could. So, like, say if I wanted to run on 8080 here, and then over here, it's going to create a hub, right? It's just creating a hub because it couldn't find a hub. It tried to find one on port 8000. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to connect to the hub, and I give it a URL. I don't give it any kind of crazy configuration. So 8080. And so now it's connected to localhost 8080. These servers, of course, don't exist, so I'm going to go to localhost 8080. Now they do. And then hit enter, and tests happen. So right, the other kind of neat thing about this is that I'm connecting on localhost 8080, but also that's where Yeti itself connects to. It connects to localhost 8080 as well. So basically, you don't need to set up, like, if you're setting up a Yeti server, that should also be really easy. Like, it shouldn't take you a long time to set up a Yeti server and have to open up a lot of ports or whatnot, right? Like, so you don't have, like, all you have to do is open up this one port, and both your browsers and your developers, the Yeti client, right, that runs on your computer, only just have to all connect through that one port. And the way it's doing that is, of course, like the browsers, use HTTP on 8080, of course, and they're also using WebSocket over 8080 to send test information, and we're using Socket.io to do that. But additionally, we're using something very similar to WebSocket inside of Yeti. It's much simplified. It's not nearly as complicated as WebSocket, and that's mostly because I didn't have the time to write a WebSocket implementation. If someone wants to write a WebSocket implementation, client implementation for Node, I'd be forever grateful. One that's really nice. But basically, I'm doing the same kind of thing. I upgrade an HTTP socket, and then that's how I'm able to transfer files back and forth. So what I'm actually doing is I'm transferring files from my computer to the Yeti hub, right, in order for it to be served from the Yeti hub, like it's being served from your computer. So that's kind of neat, and was necessary to kind of do that hard work in order to make this happen, and I think it'll be really nice for people, because it'll be really easy to run these kinds of tests.
So am I understanding correctly that setting up a Yeti server, right now you've shown you can specify the hub at a URL. So if I actually started a Yeti server out on one of my domains, that would potentially work for calling Yeti with -hub pointing out to my remote server?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if you're running it on port 80, yeah, it'll just work. Like the idea is you would just give it your, like, no, I do not. Let's see, but like Yeti dot, like this would work, right? If I had Yeti.reidburke.com set up, and if I was running Yeti like --server --port 80 on Yeti.reidburke.com, you would just and so you could easily create a configuration for Yeti, right? Like that's another thing that I'm wanting to have set up is you could have a Yeti, kind of like a Yeti RC or a Yeti configuration in your home directory, and so when you run Yeti, it'll actually try connecting to this hub URL first.
Yeah, that was what I was about to ask. Does it support any sort of configuration file, so you don't have to specify the port in the hub every time?
Yes, and it will. It will. It doesn't right now because this is the only configuration option you can give it, but there's other things that are going into Yeti Next, like timeout configuration, because that can, like what we're seeing right now, this could not find YUI test is that I've taken like in my development copy, I have a really, really aggressive timeout. Like it'll time out, it times out in seconds, like 1 or 2 seconds, instead of waiting for 30 seconds, right? And so I prefer that because most of the time it works well, except not right now, of course. But for example, so that means I can have like a nice default for the majority. But if you want to bump those kinds of timeouts and tweak them so that if for your setup you can do that and not have to specify those as command line options. So absolutely, yeah, that'll definitely, there's definitely going to be a configuration file as I add all these options, and those options kind of will need one. So, but yeah, the idea is like once you set up like a Yeti.conf, if you will, then when you run Yeti again, like you can just use your intranet, right, or your own personal Yeti kind of hub, right, and you could just give that to your team, and then they can all use this. So.
So then the issue then from what exists today, if I'm understanding you correctly, what exists today is the capacity to create a hub. You can install Yeti out on the machine that you want to be the main point of contact for your hub that has all the VMs connected to it, has all the other systems connected to it, and you set its domain, and then the individual developers on that network today can call Yeti passing in the hub for that domain, right?
Right.
That much is true so far? Okay, so then then the remaining issues to iron out with that are that the browser connection might die or something like that? What are the issues that are left with that?
Yeah, so there's quite a few issues, which is why I don't recommend people necessarily dive in and use this right away. So a few practical ones is error handling in the browser. Even though I know how it will work, I just haven't had time to implement all the cases that I know that need to be addressed. For example, like say if you give it a bad test HTML file, then like if you give it if the test HTML just has like a script tag, right, and that doesn't close, that's a problem because the browser, some browsers actually, like I found that some browsers, and I didn't have this problem with the old Yeti because I had the parent page would just time out its child page, and it doesn't really matter what was going on inside of the test itself if it was broken or not. But like when you're sharing this kind of thing and having all these browsers needing to survive, right? They need to be able to tolerate like poorly written tests and whatnot. Handling those errors is really important. So there's things, all kinds of things from like an open script tag to like a straight up 404, like it can't find the HTML file on your computer. Like you started it and the HTML file existed and then you deleted it. And so when Yeti tries to serve it to a browser, it doesn't exist because it's like it has to call back to your computer, right? Like the hub is actually, each time I'm running these tests, it's calling back not only for the widget HTML file, but for probably 30 other files. It has to load about 30 other JavaScript files. Like it's loading YUI and all of the module dependencies, right, for widget. So you're seeing a ton going on here. I could show that in a second, but basically, yeah. So there's error handling is pretty poor at this point, and that's something that needs to be addressed, I think, before people use this for serious work. But the other thing too is having this kind of configuration and stuff, like being able to having this easily set up and usable is important to me as well, and it's just not there yet. But you could see that this is the concept that I want, and that's working really well. And so I'm really looking forward, like seeing this working just really makes me happy because I know that it's possible, and so now I'm just kind of working on making it so that it doesn't cause pain for people, right? Like it's kind of rough around the edges at the moment. So by the time
so a good theme would be, if you are creating a new test file before sticking it into your Yeti system, do run it individually on at least a couple of browsers to make sure that you haven't crapped up the markup or something like that.
Yeah.
But also having maybe this is more evidence in favor of doing a test page HTML that loads in the test content from a separate script file. So you have what's used in a lot of our modules on the team is our tests are actually separate YUI modules, and we just have a YUI use statement on the page that uses that module that includes all of the tests, and then the use statement just calls test runner run. Mm-hmm. So when you're doing any test modification, it's always happening in that JavaScript file, and you're going to build that JavaScript file, and you can run it through JSLint or whatever. But the HTML is never touched, so you're not going to jeopardize the structure of the page that is going to be run by Yeti when you're modifying your tests and you're updating your tests. You might get some JavaScript errors, but that'll be because you've been modifying the JavaScript and not because you've been modifying the test page. Mm-hmm. But moral of the story being, before you inject a new test page into Yeti, the Yeti hub anyway, to run it manually in a couple of browsers at least, just to verify I haven't done anything wrong.
Yeah. Obviously, that isn't something I expect people to do when we do a kind of a general release of Yeti next, right? And so that's, of course, I'm working on that. But yeah, if you're wanting to try this stuff out, then that's a and I'll show you kind of two really quick now. So I have with the time that I have left. Let's see. So here, this is just some lovely PHP code that's just taking our unit test XML and then running Yeti with that. So so basically, all I'm doing when I run this command is you'll see the output that it does. It's starting Yeti. Go back up here. So you see it's starting Yeti with all of our tests, all of the YUI3 tests. So I'm going to go over here and localhost 9000 everything. So now I have these two agents connected. I hit enter. It's going to start testing all of YUI. And I'm probably going to get a lot of errors, sadly. But in fact, I think I can actually...
These are the script errors from the timeout that you have, not
yeah,
errors
the timeout is too aggressive, yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and change that real quick because I can't stand it anymore. Let's see. But let's see. Yeah, I accidentally reverted this when I shouldn't have, so. Actually, that's fine. And okay. I'm just cache busting here over, so. Cool. So there we go. Hopefully it will be a little bit better now. Some of the tests will be bad, so there it goes. And I'm also running not the current YUI3 branch when I'm doing these tests, so some of the things won't work so well either. There'll be some test failures, but the test failures are good. It shows me that it's testing a snapshot.
Oh, okay.
It's testing just a random snapshot that had some test failures, and I reference that snapshot a bit so I can see what test failures kind of look like. So unfortunately, yeah, I don't get these timeouts happening nearly as much.
When you're not hogging your resources with a connect session.
Yeah, typically. So.
Sure.
But yeah, this is the idea is yeah, you get all these, and it runs to completion. And it's really cool, as you saw before. That's another thing I didn't like about the old Yeti. If anyone here remembers how Yeti used to work, it would finish all your tests and then just kind of hang there. But that doesn't happen anymore. Like I've really never liked that at all, and I knew it would just take a lot of work at the outset to fix that properly. So even though you're seeing all these errors and other things, like the system will never just hang there. Like that's the something that I really want. It does that. That's what I meant when I said earlier I need to resolve some error cases when that can happen. But it's something I really care about now. Like I want it this when you're integrating this into a system that does something like continuous integration. You want to make sure that this thing will run and then run run to completion and then give you a result at the end of it. So that's what this will do. Like at the end of this, when it runs through the entire list with all the errors and everything else, it'll exit and give you a code. And the idea is that you can also pass, like say, like you can get different kind of output formats than just this one, right? You can give it, say, JSON, get a JSON stream back, or you can get, say, I don't know, a JUnit XML, so you can throw that in to like something like Jenkins, like a CI system. So, but yeah, so.
Cool. So now this is something that you're doing on personal time, or this is company time? You're dedicated to this, or how's this fitting into your workload?
So this is probably about 70% of my workload on YUI right now. The rest of it is so which
That's
is
a
cool.
recent change that you haven't been working on yet.
Yeah, so I've gotten, it used to be 50 probably last month, and now it's increasing, and that's kind of this isn't all I do, right? Like the other part of my time is spent on keeping the build system alive, or other kinds of time, time things that are other responsibilities that I have outside of builder and testing and our CI and our YUI's own CI system. So I have some things outside of that have also taken up my time, but now I'm just pretty much working on this, which is really cool. So yeah, it's starting to finish up here. So yeah.
Cool. And so let's talk a little bit about the release schedule of this, because we have 350 PR3 is coming out in a couple of weeks at the beginning of March in preparation for the GA. And so Yeti's release schedule is now in sync with the YUI release schedule. How is that working now?
Yeah. So we actually have. So what I'm doing is, and all of my tasks that I'm doing with Yeti are going to be on YUI library, but not under the YUI 3 project. They're under the Yeti project. But now I have basically for every YUI sprint, I do 2 sprints. So there's YUI has a 4-week sprint, and then I'll have so basically I just have 2 sprints in that same amount of time, and they start the first sprint starts with YUI sprint, and then my second sprint will end at the end of YUI's sprint, right? So like I've started a new one kind of technically today is when I start this next one. And so like some of the things that I wanted to fix and do were mostly be under the cover stuff that you don't get to see in this demo, that make the file transfer stuff happen and make, as you could see, like interacting from, say, where this green line is, like that's another computer. So I had to go from like my computer to the hub to a browser, and there's all kinds of events happening between those. And so like a lot of the work I did so far has just been under the covers. And so now, like in this next sprint, in the next 2 weeks, I'm spending most of my time still not necessarily underneath the cover stuff, but stuff I feel like has to be done, like getting all the components of Yeti well tested. Getting great test coverage in Yeti itself, and then after that, I'm going to start caring about like some of the nicer things in the sprint to come. So it would probably be 3 weeks from now when I start on doing some of the things, the enhancements that I've talked about. So like the kind of the nice summary page and whatnot. That's still several weeks away from me starting on it. But why I'm not working on that right now is because I want to kind of get the code to a point where I can have other people help me on it sooner rather than later. So that's why I'm going to spend time the next 2 weeks working on even more still on, less so on stability per se, and more on like tests and documentation, so make sure that I can have other people help me out, right? because a lot of people have, obviously a lot of people get excited about some of this stuff because it's so different and it has a promise of working really well, and a lot of people can agree with that. So and they want to help. So I want to make it easy for them to help. So that's where I'm coming from. So the next 2 weeks, so if you're interested in helping me out with some of this stuff, basically, that's coming really really soon. And if you're really eager, you can dive into the same code I'm looking at, but and kind of get a look at that. But I still imagine some things are going to change. So that's why I'm saying that's why in a few weeks I think it'll be prime time for other people helping me out. Like say adding JUnit support, or a JSON output thing, or writing some more tests to cover edge cases, or improving the performance of Yeti Next, because it works, but I think it can be a lot more performant. I think when you start throwing 50 browsers at this thing, we could start seeing it start to strain. So that kind of thing, I think people can help me out with, and I would love for them to. So that's coming up really soon. So for releases, that's going to happen in these 2-week kind of sprints. You're going to expect that in this next one, I don't know if I'll have a release in this next, so I haven't had one for this sprint, and I don't think there'll be one in the next one, but I think probably maybe a month from now, I'll be at the point where I'll be way more comfortable with people using this thing, because I'm going to a lot of the bugs that you've seen in this demo, I've spent a lot of time on and getting those kinds of things worked out. So yeah,
Sounds good. Then we'll just check back in with you after about a month, or a couple, maybe 6 weeks or something like that, and see the state of Yeti then, and should be stabilized from what it is right now. But at least we have a good look right now. It's a preview as far as the features that are coming in development, and it's good to know that you're working on this with a good chunk of your time, because it's certainly exciting to me. It's exciting to a lot of people. So hearing that it's being actively developed instead of sidelined for other things is definitely good to hear.
Yeah, I'm really happy I'm getting to work on this. So it's just great. So
good times. Okay, so then we'll definitely ping an update over Twitter, most likely when we have some idea of its stability. We reach some magical point where we're ready to have some community contribution, or at least we feel that it's stabilized in terms of its internal direction and structure, that now would be a good time to help, and you wouldn't be wasting time on architecture that might be changing out from underneath you. But definitely, if you want to get into those early decisions as far as how it's stabilizing, and working through the proof of concept code into more stabilized architecture, you're welcome to join in sooner than later. And the more eyes, the better. It's all open source. It's out there on GitHub, and so we'll check back in.
Sure. Can I just mention one specific thing that maybe someone out here, will enjoy this or something, and they'll think that they can help me out or something. So one thing on GitHub, so this is on the Yeti Next bit. So this is /read Yeti tree next. So this is something that I'm going to spend the next few. Well, I think by Wednesday next week. Okay. Yeah. Bring this bigger. What I'm going to spend the next week or so doing, because I have other responsibilities too, or other things I'm trying to get done with Yeti. But one thing that I'm trying to do is, this is actually this protocol is what, which I'm not going to go over at all, but this protocol is what's transferring the files back and forth, and it's really really simple. It's a little bit complicated. It looks complicated, but that's because I was very specific with speccing out what's happening over the wire and sending out files back and forth. So it looks scary, but if you guys, I don't know, if someone out there really is loves Node.js and loves dealing with binary data, or dealing with or wants to write a new parser for Blizzard, it really needs a new parser. So the parser that I'm using is I'm using a module to do the parsing, and it works. Like it will work, but it's the bottleneck right now in Yeti. So if you're interested in that, like this will be one of the first things that someone can help me with, is actually writing a new parser for this protocol. Or in general, if you care about WebSockets, like the thing is, in a long period of time, I would love to replace Blizzard entirely with WebSockets, but that isn't necessary right now. Like right now, I just need someone to like read through this protocol specification and then write a better parser, and maybe help me out with the tests, because that's what I'm going to be doing in the next few days, is writing tests for this. So when someone writes a new parser, I can just throw that in. Otherwise, I'll be writing a new parser in the next 2 weeks, and that will take me away from time doing other things. So this is one of the things that I think someone can help me with right away if someone really wants to get started and do something for Yeti. So
Cool.
but
right on.
yeah, I can talk offline for anyone who happens to be interested in that kind of thing. So.
Sounds good. Why don't you go and hang out in the IRC channel, the YUI IRC channel, or are there other channels that you would like to get contacted through?
Yeah, IRC channel. You could send me, mention me on Twitter, or I'm rburke@yahooinc.com. I'll throw that up here real quick. So.
Or or I suppose you could just add a comment in the Open Hours invite blog post, and that'll make its way.
Yeah.
So just as we close out the day, just a note about next week. We have on deck Eamon Brosnan is going to be reporting from Down Under about his project called Buildy, which is a node.js replacement, I guess, it's targeted as a replacement for a build system instead of using Ant. It's all JavaScript built on Node.js, and he's been developing it for a little while now, and he's using it every day, and he thinks that it's getting pretty close to a state where he's ready to call it version 1, and I know that I'm certainly looking forward to not dealing with Ant anymore. So Eamon will be with us next week on Open Hours, and he might also talk about another project that he has going on. I think it's called YBuild, but it's the build tool that he uses to build up his own YUI modules. That sits on top of Buildy. So Buildy is just a build tool like Ant, and YBuild is I hope I'm getting this right, is the project that sits on top of Buildy that is specific to building YUI modules. So hopefully both of them will be useful to YUI users, but Buildy should be useful in and outside of the YUI context as far as hopefully a replacement for Ant if you're more comfortable coding in JavaScript than in XML. But that's on deck for next week, and I think that's going to call it for today. I'll send out the Open Hours invite about that in a couple of days, and we'll hopefully see you all next week. And look for the video or the recording of this Open Hours up on our YouTube channel, and I'll tweet that out a little bit later and update the blog post. So for Reid Burke and Eric and Ryan and the rest of us, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys. See ya.